Hello and welcome to Route 664, the road to human kindness. I'm Les Winston. I'm your host. I'm also the national spokesperson for socialcharity.org, a project of the Endow American Network Foundation, and my co-host, Wanda.
Hey.
Joining us today.
It's good to be here.
Yes, it is good to be here.
Nice
We had
to
a
see
really
you.
interesting show last week.
I don't see you enough.
Well, that's not my problem. We got a couple of inquiries over the course of the week following our last show, where we were talking about the tools of social charity, how to use them, and how people have used them in the past. We discussed a couple in their 70s. We discussed a businessman
Jack and Diane.
in his 50s. Jack and Diane, right?
Yeah.
And a businessman in his 50s, and also a young couple who were in their 40s. And I got a phone call from a young person, a person in their 30s, who was very successful and was having a banner year in their plastic surgery practice.
During this COVID time?
Yeah, exactly.
Go figure.
Go figure is right. But people do want to look good. So he's been doing very well. And he does have a tax problem. He had a tax problem last year. And he had listened to the program. He said, "Boy, I wish I had done this last year because I'm going to pay a big number to the government." And I said, "Are you charitable? Do you have charitable intent?" And he said, "Absolutely." He says, "I'd like to support a lot of organizations." So I said, "Well, we should get together and talk about how this can benefit you in your practice and how it can benefit you in your life, and lead you into the era of human kindness."
Yep.
And take advantage of what the government has given us in ways to keep more of our money and have more to spend rather than pay it in taxes, but also to do something really good for yourself in the future. I know you probably want to have more income, and he agreed. He had been contributing the maximum he could to his 401k plan. He had done everything possible to accumulate money and was looking for another way. But he didn't realize, and this was the key that came out in our discussion in the prior show, was that being in his 40s, he could still take advantage of charitable planning and get a significant tax deduction by using certain types of charitable programs that are available in the tax code. And that made a big difference, because it was assumed that these charitable arrangements only work for older people, people in their 60s and late 50s and so on, because the amount of tax deduction that they would get by going into a split interest arrangement was not going to be as significant. But using pooled income funds is a way for young people to get very good tax advantages, but also to be able to create income. So that was a interesting revelation to me, that most people, younger people, don't really know about how to use these charitable gifts, and that they're available to them, and they should think about that. And they can check that out on socialcharity.org if they want to look at those case studies. They're right there on socialcharity.org. And see how they may apply to you. And if you think it's something that may work in your situation, you can contact a professional philanthropic advisor through the website in your area of the country, and see whether or not it works in your case. Also, we're looking forward to our guest today.
Yeah.
Brad Aronson has written a book called Human Kind.
Mm-hmm.
And
I got it.
I've been reading through it, and I think it's a marvelous piece of work, because it goes along with what we're talking about, the road to human kindness. And Brad joins us this morning. Good morning, Brad.
Me on your show.
It's a pleasure to have you. I wanted to ask you, first of all, about the Human Kind Hall of Fame. How did you? Is that your original idea?
So the Hall of Fame, actually, I had thought of putting together a list of places where people can have a huge impact. It was an editor who came up with the great title of the Hall of Fame. Uh-huh. And the purpose is, so many people who are listening to the news and looking around feel that I want to make a difference, but there's so much bad going on. I don't see how one person can make a difference. So in this section of the book, I put together places where we can make a difference, in as little as writing a letter that'll get forwarded to a child in the hospital or a foster student in college, to a charity where if you donate $200, you can cure someone's blindness. So I tried to find ways that we could have impact and feel great about it.
So it's not the size of the gift, obviously, from what I'm reading in your book, Human Kind. And the size of a gift, and actually the gift of money is not the only way that human kindness occurs. Now, you started this book because of your own situation. You talk about the hardship that you were going through with an illness with Mia, your wife, and the help that you got from people, the acts of kindness. I know that those kinds of things do stimulate us a lot. But you decided to record that by writing things down. So take us through that time in your life and why it became so important to you to share that with others.
So at that time, my wife, Mia, had a swollen lymph node in her side and went to the physician. And we found out that she had leukemia. And the doctor said, you need to go to the hospital immediately. If all goes well, you'll come out in 30 days, and then you'll have 2.5 years of outpatient chemo, which is going back to the hospital 3 or 5 days a week for hours of treatment. And partway through this treatment, and I should also say my wife is healthy. She made it through treatment. We're very grateful. Partway through treatment, the nurses said, you should go to a conference for young cancer patients and their caregivers. And we didn't want to go. You spend all day in the hospital. The last thing you want to do is go to a conference about cancer on the weekend. In our case, that's the last thing we wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But the nurses were amazing. And anyone who's been through treatment knows that the nurses make it so that you can succeed. And we thought if they suggested we go, we should go. At this conference, one of the speakers had been through the same treatment as Mia. And she said, if you have 2.5 years of chemo ahead of you, you need to come up with a project. A project will give you a distraction, it'll give you something to do and a purpose while you're spending hours in the hospital. So we all came up with projects. Mia's project was to write in a journal. Our son, who is an avid Philadelphia Phillies fan, decided that he would play 200 days of wiffle ball in a row. He was the United States Postal Service of wiffle ball players. Rain, sleet, or snow, we played 200 days in a row. It was the best season ever for the Phillies because he won every game against whatever team I was representing.
That's great.
And I decided to write about the small acts of kindness that changed our lives. I had always been a volunteer. I had always been someone who gave back, and I hadn't needed help before, and I didn't even know how to accept it. I was pretty bad at accepting help. I kept pushing people off. But thankfully, people wouldn't take no for an answer, and they just started doing things for us. And my project was writing about all the small acts of kindness that changed our lives. And I found that it actually changed my perspective. So as I was writing it, I was in this mindset of why us, right? Why does my wife have to go through this? Why does our 5-year-old son not have his mom around? And as I was writing about all these kind acts, I started realizing I'm pretty lucky. And we have all these people around us. And it helped change my mindset. It doesn't mean I was happy with the way things were. It doesn't mean I didn't feel like I wished it wasn't us, but it made me more positive. And then after I wrote about all those small acts that changed our lives, I started writing about moments when a seemingly trivial act of kindness has a ripple effect and completely changes a life or thousands of people's lives.
And that's what you talk about. Not only in the case of your own personal situation, but you've also expanded it to other acts of kindness that you've found that you are relating to everyone, because philanthropy is the love of humankind. It's not charity per se. It's trying to make a difference in people's lives, and you don't have to do that with money alone. You don't have to wait till you're ultra rich to be able to improve other people's lives. You can do that with very simple acts of kindness. There were some things in your book that I thought were fascinating. That one of them was the Santa idea that you were talking about. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that story?
So this story is about a man named Larry Stewart. And Larry had grown up in poverty. He never realized it until he went to school and found out that other kids had bathrooms in their houses and electricity and everything he didn't have.
He
But
got invaded by poverty, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And he worked really hard and was living a good life, supporting himself. And then his employer was having trouble. They had missed 2 paychecks in a row, but promised him they would get it to him. The third paycheck never got to him, and he found himself homeless, living in his car. And he was so hungry. He went into the Dixie Diner, ordered breakfast with no idea how he'd pay for it. And when he was done eating, he looked around on the ground and said, I lost my wallet. And the cook came around and said, oh, I found this. It must be yours, and gave him $20. And
Wow.
Larry used that $20 to pay for his meal and swore that when he was back on his feet, he would help other people. So fast forward, Larry was an entrepreneur. He became successful. And one day he's at a restaurant where the waitress, it was a restaurant where you eat in your car and they come out to you, and the waitress had on this jacket that was barely covering her. And he gave her a really big tip and said, keep the change. And she teared up and said, you don't know how much this means to me. But really, he did. And he went that night and went around just giving out $20 bills to people in need. And it became a tradition where he decided the way that the cook helped him, he would give to people in a way they didn't have to beg for money or ask for it. And he would become a secret Santa. So he went, and the local fire department and social workers would tell him people in need, and he would anonymously give them money. He'd go to Goodwill and often find families where grandparents were taking care of their grandkids, and he'd give them money, and they'd say, this is allowing me to have a Christmas. He'd help people not get their electricity turned off. And people started writing about this secret Santa. And when they wrote about it, all these other people were inspired and became secret Santas. So there's an organization with a website where there's thousands of secret Santas who are going out doing good in the world because of Ted Horn, who's the owner of that diner, and gave him $20. And years later, Larry tracked him down. He finds him and says, you don't know this, but because of you, I became Secret Santa. And Larry himself gave away $1.6 million as a Secret Santa. Wow. And now there's a foundation that supports the Secret Santa tradition continuing. And the first person to donate to that charity was a man named Sam. And Sam said the first gift he ever got was from Secret Santa. So he wanted to help pay it forward. And it was all that gesture that changed Larry's life and led to this society of Secret Santas.
And I know that this story, of course, got a lot of coverage on the mainstream media because they love these stories, don't they?
Yes.
Not to be cynical, but
we're
love
mainstream those stories. I love those stories.
Yeah, I love those stories, but I'm being cynical. Obviously, we're mainstream media, and we're covering this because we want people to hear about human kindness and good things. But why do you think the media doesn't want to talk about it? The general media.
I think the general media is stretched incredibly thin. So their businesses are having a really rough time, and they're stretched thin. So they're covering the inbound, which is often the bad news. But I think recently I've seen an increase in good news coverage. So in Philadelphia, our daily paper came out with a section called The Upside that only covers good news. And other cities have had the same thing happen in their paper. So I think more and more people are looking to add the good news, but so often it is the bad news, right? I could hear about someone who got mugged in California, which is across the US, and I won't hear about the kids who beat all the odds and graduated in Philadelphia, the city I live in. So it does.
If you do, sometimes they'll tell that story, but it's like the last 60 seconds of the whole newscast. I've noticed. It's like you wait till the end, you'll get the good stuff.
Right.
Right.
Well,
the things that make you feel good about society are the things that make you feel good about the world and other people in general.
But it's there.
Yeah. You know, the history of the world, according to Les Winston, has always been real short. We went through tribalism, religiosity, and then we went to political world, and now we're in an economic world. And I think we're evolving into the era of human kindness. And when I say that we're evolving into the era of human kindness, people always laugh at that and snicker because they can't imagine how, based on what they're seeing, we're in an era of human kindness. But I believe that to be true. And I think that you're a very strong proponent of that, especially writing a book, Human Kind. And I have to tell you, I recommend anybody that's listening to get the book, because it'll help you. It's a guide through life in a way that that's very positive. So, what's your next venture? What is the thing that you want to do, from where you are now to the next step for you?
Well, what's been incredibly exciting about the book is I've gotten hundreds of emails from people who read the book and said, I didn't realize how much of a difference I could make in the world. Here's what I'm doing. And they're outlining all the things that they've started doing. And that was kind of my dream, is that it would inspire people to take action. And I'd like to kind of keep pushing that message out there. Of course, all the proceeds of the book go to Big Brothers Big Sisters. So I'd love to see more money go to Big Brothers Big Sisters. And personally, I'm deeply engaged in workforce development in our area and helping young people in poverty get sustainable wage jobs. And I see companies really interested in helping and supporting us there. And I'd love to see that continue to grow, because that's the next generation.
Well, I love at the end of each chapter, you give us an idea of what we can do, like steps to, actually, it is what we can do, steps that we can do to make things a little better, learn to listen better. I love that one. Share the positive, one of my favorites. And just little things, little action plans for folks to move ahead. And of course, there's donating to charity and all sorts of things you can do, but just things you can do right away.
Well, we're in the year of human kindness. So again, any guidelines that we have that we can share to make it easier for people to get hold of this concept of why it's beneficial to the community and actually beneficial to themselves to be givers. How do you feel about that when you're I mean, my first incident of helping somebody is something I never forget. And it was as simple as helping a lady who in a rainstorm had no umbrella, and I ended up walking her to her home, which was way outside of the boundaries that I was used to in my community. And I never forgot that. And it was like a natural thing to me. I think that's the way most people deal with these things. But they need to be turned on to that. So your family and your neighbors that came to your aid in the time of Mia's crisis, how do they respond to what you have written about them?
They loved the book. Part of it was a way for me to say thank you to them. So, I have the section at the beginning where I talk about our family, and I was nervous because so many people came out to help us. And the time was just such a blur in my life, right? My wife is in the hospital. I'm trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for a 5-year-old son, trying to do work, trying to juggle everything. So I was afraid I would forget people. But people just said, wow, I didn't realize that made such a difference. I think people don't know how the littlest things can have the biggest impact. And it was good for them to see that. And for me, it gave me a whole game plan of what I can do to support people. Being on the receiving end really teaches you a lot. And as you saw from the book, like Larry Stewart's example, so many of the people in the book went on to help thousands of people because of a small act of kindness someone did for them. So it's that ripple effect from an act of kindness that's incredible.
Well, the highest form of charity, according to ancient times, was to help somebody become successful in to be able to succeed, to teach them how to be successful, and also to actually do it anonymously is the highest level. But I really thank you for joining us today on Route 664, The Road to Human Kindness, with the author of a guide to that. Thank you, Brad Aronson, for joining us and letting us
What's in the
share
website that we can send people to, Brad?
It's my name, bradaronson.com.
All right, great.
And thank you for having me. I appreciate being here, and I appreciate what you're doing, helping people make the world a better place and get more money to charities that need them.
Awesome.
Yep. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. So, social charity is a tool to human kindness. Um, the object of social charity is to actually provide the fuel for human kindness. It's a way for us to take advantage of what the government has actually directed us to do or given us the right to do through Section 664. And that's one of the things we want you to get familiar with. We want you to become familiar with that term, 664, just like you know about a 401k or a 529 or other sections of the tax code. You need to become familiar with Section 664. Use that to help yourself, help your family, and then create human kindness. Give to those things that you care about, that you want to have an interest in, that you want to see succeed, and that's what we're all about at this particular point in time in our history. We've evolved to the level of returning to where we were centuries ago, because human kindness and charity have been around for a long time. Philanthropy is from the Greek, and it's not something that we created. It's been here forever. And so we're just reintroducing it into the community and reintroducing it to our listeners and to those who want to become difference makers. And Wanda, I want to thank you for
kind of something we created
Brad
in the past.
Yep.
And just kind of moving it forward, getting it to move us forward.
Using what we've been taught, using what we've instinctively been able to do. Children are philanthropic by nature. They share. I don't know if you've seen some of the TED Talks of young people who are discovering philanthropy or discovering human kindness, and they're actually delving into it from a more, from a deeper level to see whether it's inborn, whether it's something that we have automatically. And I think it is. I think we're basically social human beings, social people.
I think we're born
beings.
kind. I think that we're born. I don't think we're born with this natural inclination to consume another human being or, another
cannibalism.
Well, for the most part, I mean, those are ones that got a little ahead of themselves. But bumps.
Well, at least we lighten it up a little bit. But listen, this is about light things. This is about good things.
It's about being good.
Yeah, we're not talking about
human kind.
Exactly.
There it is.
Exactly.
Very easy.
So, what do we think we want to do? What's coming up? I did get a chance to look at the Facebook site, the Social Charity Facebook.
Yeah.
And all of our shows are there. I love them. I just watch them all the time.
I just have them on loop.
So you got to take advantage of what we're providing and entertain yourself with the Social Charity Facebook, and also go to our website and get more information about what's going on. I think the comparison between Social Charity and Social Security is important. We've interviewed David Walker, who was the former Comptroller General under Presidents Bush and Clinton, and his interview, really supports the concept that we need to do something to change the way the financial picture of this country is right now. That the debt that we've accumulated and the debt that's being accumulated is not sustainable, and it's exceeding our gross domestic product, and that becomes very problematic from a financial planning perspective as far as the country is concerned. And in fact, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal where in 2050 they expect the national debt ratio to GDP to exceed 200%, and that is absolutely not sustainable. So what are we doing? What are we leaving behind to our children and our grandchildren if we continue to pursue this kind of irresponsible, in a way, financial planning for the country? And somebody asked me recently about just charitable financial planning in general. How is that technique done? As a chartered advisor in philanthropy, I have a designation from the American College that is a postgraduate degree in charitable financial planning, which allows me to bring into the planning perspective the tax planning aspects of charitable giving. And I've been asked, is it really that complicated? It really isn't that complicated, because in financial planning, we deal with 5 financial hazards that everybody is exposed to, and that's dying too soon, the prospect of getting sick or disabled, the loss of property, being sued by third parties, and then the most difficult one to really plan for is the hazard of living too long. And when I say that to people, they say, well, how can you have a hazard from living too long? Well, living too long is a hazard if you run out of money, you run out of friends and family, you run out of purpose. So those are things that people need to plan for. And doing that using Social Security becomes a little bit easier, because that one objective of trying to plan for living too long, you try and find ways to create as much income that will last for a lifetime as you can. And these Social Security tools are a way to do that. Social Security is also a tool that gives you a lifetime income, but it's only a promise that the government has made. It's not a guarantee. And we don't know what's going to happen to that in the future, just as we don't know what's going to happen to Medicare and other things that the government has provided. So we have to start to think about how we can take care of ourselves and our community at a local level. And I think that the key to that is probably going to be Social Security planning overall. So Social Security is 664. Those two terms are interchangeable. And people need to become more familiar with that section of the code, familiar with that idea that you can use 664 to do your long-term income planning, tax planning, planning for your family, and planning for the community. So Wanda, what do you think we should do next week?
I would love to harp more on about being a kind human, because that's the angle I'm coming from. It's just encouraging people to be kinder to one another, which is why I appreciate Brad for being here today and talking about the ways, just spotlighting the positive things that we do for one another and not so much harping on the negativity. And if I can do a little bit of that, if I could just spread a little bit of love, that's why I'm here, spreading the human kindness. So if you want to be a kind human, jump on board. SocialSecurity.org. We have lots of information for you there. And Les?
Yes, ma'am.
Want to dance us out?
Yeah. Again, this is
BradAronson.com. I just want to throw that out there. BradAronson.com. Lots of great stuff on the website to just find out, about how you can encourage your kids to be kind, how you can find charities. There we go. To be kind.
Philanthropy.
To philanthropists.
Be kind to human beings.
There you go. All right,
others.
I'm done. I am done.
Okay.
For now.
Thank you for joining us on Route 664, the road to human kindness, and thank you to community newspapers for the use of the space.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next week. Did a little bit shorter than usual.